The Second Message, Life or Death. June 26, 2019 by Anna von Reitz. Yesterday, we sent out an urgent message and asked the help of white hats, patriots, and human rights activists everywhere to distribute the information to the President, the Queen, the Pope, the members of Congress, members of the Roman Curia and others responsible for the continuing abuse of living people. That message can be summarized as, we have proof now that the U.S. Department of State is trying to mischaracterize all Americans as citizens of the United States. This is both a grossly self-serving lie and an impossibility. We explained why in the article released yesterday, Note to Pope and Congress, there are no 14th Amendment citizens. We described how and why and by whom this purported political status was created. It was created by a long-defunct Scottish corporation merely calling itself the United States of America, Incorporated, as a means to steal our identity and plunder our resources, including our credit. They basically exhausted our credit, went bankrupt, and left us holding the bag for their crime and fraud. The political status of so-called 14th Amendment citizens was created by this criminal corporation as a means to enslave and seize upon freed plantation slaves as human chattel pledged to pay off public debt. Plantation slaves went from being owned by other people to being owned by foreign corporations in the business of providing governmental services. Private slave ownership was abolished, but public slave ownership allowed by these venal perpetrators. Black people in this country were never actually set free as a result. So what is a citizen of the United States, as stated by the perpetrators of this big lie? A citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as a co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the public charitable trust, the Constructive Sestuike Trust of the U.S. Inc. under the 14th Amendment, which upholds the debt of the USA and U.S. Inc. Congressional Record, June 13, 1967, pp. 15641-15646. When you look up the referenced public charitable trust, you learn that this is a welfare fund set up for the relief of displaced black plantation slaves in the wake of the Civil War. So according to the U.S. Department of State, we are all Negroes, we are all destitute, we are all in receipt of welfare benefits and we are all knowingly operating in the above capacity as co-trustees and co-beneficiaries of this same public charitable trust. A more outrageous lie is hard to imagine, but that is, in effect, what the U.S. Department of State is trying to allege about every single American seeking or using a U.S. passport. They are promoting a fraud based on the earlier criminal fraud of a foreign governmental services corporation that went bankrupt in 1907. Today, we are asking all white hats and freedom lovers, all patriots, all human rights activists to get this second message to the Congress and the White House and all the other guilty government and church officials worldwide: only lawful persons can own lawful assets. This simple fact, that only lawful persons can own actual assets, is the motivation for this hideous, outrageous, criminal false claim being promoted against the American people by the U.S. Department of State under Michael Pompeo. Above and beyond providing the perpetrators with an excuse to make false claims against us and our assets, this same claim unlawfully converts people into persons and deprives us of our ability to own private property. 14th Amendment citizenship was always a perfidious scam from the get-go, and we explained why, but there is another element to this we didn't touch upon, and that is the fact that such legal persons are all inchoate. They are incomplete. They are, one or more steps too many, detached from physical actuality. They are mental constructs only. Your lawful person, your given trade name, is your property, an asset belonging to you in the same sense that a bicycle belongs to you, and like a bicycle, it serves you as a means for you to travel to and communicate with others about yourself and for them to communicate to and about you. Your lawful person naturally populates the land jurisdiction of your State of the Union and is only subject to the public law of this country. It represents you as an actual fact, not as a legal fiction, not as a foreign situs trust, not as a co-trustee or co-beneficiary, not an incorporated entity or officer of any kind. Legal fiction persons don't exist by definition, and that is another reason that 14th Amendment citizens don't exist. Literally. Now to understand the second message, only lawful persons can own lawful assets. What is actual and factual only belongs to and with what is actual and factual. The Roman Curia has already been presented with the scripture forbidding impersonation of living flesh, and now they are served notice that they are operating in violation of the law of kinds as well. The collective entity doctrine is an offense to both scripture and logic. Living people are the lawful owners of land and gold and silver and every other actual possession on this planet, and their lawful persons are the only abstraction directly representing them. A legal person can act as an administrator, an executor, a transferee, a trustee, or any number of similar capacities for a lawful person, but cannot bridge the gap between fiction and actuality. As a result, a legal person cannot actually own land or diamonds or gold or even a bouquet of flowers. Commercial persons are a specialized variety of legal persons that are even one step more removed from the world of actual fact, and so are even less competent to possess actual assets. For this reason, both legal persons and commercial persons operate on a fictional basis. They use commercial script instead of actual gold or silver money. They deal in stocks, bonds, and certificates because they can't interface with actual possession of anything in the factual world. Legal fictions deal with symbols of things, fiat money and ledgers representing silver dollars, birth certificates representing ownership interest in an actual nativity, bonds representing a debt of some kind, stocks representing a share of ownership benefit or interest. As a result, it is impossible for a legal fiction person of any kind to possess land or silver coins or gold for itself. Why? Because a legal fiction is universally dispossessed of the material world. Reducing living men and women to the level of legal persons utterly deprives them of their rights and dignities, and this is the crucial one, their private property. Now ask yourself what happens when every living man or woman is being mischaracterized, deliberately, as a legal fiction person belonging as chattel to a governmental services corporation? They become slaves. They can have no private property nor possession of actual assets, by definition. They can, as a business, a trust, a partnership, a coalition, a cooperative, a foundation, a public transmitting utility, an NGO, a PLC, an LLC, the list goes on, and on, manage assets, use assets, even abuse assets, but they cannot by definition possess or truly own anything in the factual world. Once you step off the edge of the earth and continue the process of abstraction beyond the simple lawful person of your given name, you are dealing in a realm of fiction divorced from fact, a kingdom of lies, the realm of Satan. So, here we are. Thanks to these shysters falsifying records and making false claims in commerce, virtually everyone has been secretively redefined as a legal fiction person, purported identities that have been conferred upon us without our knowledge or consent, for the purpose of stealing our private property, beginning with our given names. The agents of the British Crown have stolen our identities, literally. They have copyrighted our given names and seized upon our unregistered trademarks, and they did this while we were still babies in our cradle, so that we could have no conscious knowledge or memory of the theft and therefore, could never object to it. This is an unconscionable contracting process that is both illegal and unlawful, but they have done this just the same, in violation of the Geneva Conventions and the Hague Conventions and virtually every declaration ever made by the United Nations, and all to one purpose, to deprive us of our private property and our private identity and our ability to own anything in our own names. This is a white-collar form of enslavement and genocide on paper, and they are being ordered to cease and desist. All of this gross criminality is being orchestrated under the auspices of the municipal United States government chartered by the Roman Catholic Church and run as an oligarchy by the members of Congress. As we also pointed out, it has nothing to do with us, our states of the Union, our country, nor even the Confederate States of states that fought the Civil War. This is all mismanagement, fraud, criminality and graft engaged in by federal contractors obligated under commercial contract and international treaty to provide us with good faith service and essential government services. We are exposing this gross, venal corruption for the single purpose of putting an end to it and reclaiming our private property, our good names, our copyrights, our unregistered trademarks, our land and soil, our gold and silver, and everything else that actually and factually belongs to us. We are not citizens of the United States, nor are we citizens of the United States, and making any false claim that we are, is already defined as a crime by the British territorial government, 18 U.S.C. 911, not that their statutory law applies to us, but it does apply to them and any territory occupied by them. The existence of this statute proves that the British territorial government has been aware of the problem, but hasn't enforced against it. That is, the U.S. Army looked the other way, and so did the hordes of bar and district attorneys that have infested our shores like locusts. They knew, they declared it a crime, and they did nothing to enforce their own law and defend and support their employers, the actual states and people. Instead, they actively colluded with the members of Congress to mischaracterize their employers and evade the limitations and obligations of the constitutions owed to the actual states and people of this country by deliberately mischaracterizing our federation states as Confederate states and mischaracterizing Americans as citizens of the United States. Here again we are dealing with foreign contractors obligated by venerable commercial contract and international trilateral treaties caught acting in bad faith and knowingly colluding against their innocent employers, failing to uphold their own published statutory laws and trying to excuse their misconduct and criminality on the basis of a 150-year-old commercial conflict that never involved us in the first place. We have extensively dealt with the issue of 14th Amendment citizenship, and why we are not and never were in any such political status. We have dealt with the issue of taking title to us and mischaracterizing us as former plantation slaves. And we have dealt with the issue of the odious debt these con artists have hypothecated against us and our actual assets. If Mr. Trump and the U.S. Army are to do their duty by the people of this country, they must recognize who the people are, and admit the simple fact that we are not converted into persons just because some fat bureaucrats say so behind our backs. This criminal misadministration by the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. passport agencies must be addressed, as must the continuing misadministration of the IRS, Internal Revenue Service. Americans are owed over $25 trillion worth of national credit, as well as the return of title to all of our actual and factual assets. We, the lawful persons, the people of this country, are the only ones competent to receive back our assets, and we declare openly that our assets are not abandoned, have not been voluntarily donated, and don't belong to the U.S. Inc. or the USA Inc., either one. We are not chattel belonging to these same corporations, are not subjects of the Queen, are not subjects of the Pope, and are not subjects of the members of any Congress. We are not legal persons of any kind. We are each sovereigns in our own right. We are lawful persons known as the people of this country, and we are owed every jot of each federal constitution, and also by definition, we are not any species of citizen of the United States. Mr. Trump, you need to correct Mike Pompeo and the U.S. Department of State, U.S. State Department for accidentally on purpose misidentifying millions of Americans as citizens of the United States, for issuing false passports, for making false claims in commerce against us, for conspiring against the constitutions and acting in bad faith with respect to all the contractual obligations of the Pope and the Queen and the members of Congress. It's high time everyone involved in so-called public service stopped bilking their employers, from the Queen and the Pope on down. The U.S. Department of the Treasury needs a good swift kick in the rump, and the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, needs to cease and desist collections under false presumptions. Both agencies need to retool to issue mutual offset credit exchanges the people of this country are owed, and all the personnel involved need a slap-in-the-face readjustment of attitude from Stephen T. Mnuchin on down. The U.S. Department of State needs to correct all passports issued to Joe and Jane average American to reflect their actual political status as state nationals without any tricks, without trying to foist off presumed private contracts or obligations, without trying to confer any foreign citizenships upon them. No ear tags. No presumed donation of DNA. None of it. And if the secondary creditors don't like these reforms recognizing the sovereignty of our states and people, they know what they can do. Send the bills to Prince Philip. Prince Philip and the governor of Ottawa colluded to abscond with $950 trillion in life force value annuities that belong to Americans and Canadians just before Prince Philip's retirement from public life. He can pay all the bills owed by the presumed to exist corporate franchises and return the excess to the people to whom it is all owed via appropriately managed restitution programs.